It's also a little bit unlike some apocalypses because you have these 7 letters in the beginning of the book that are addressed to 7 different churches in Asia Minor. But one of the interesting things about all of Revelation is its structure. I talked about Hebrews last week, and I gave you an outline to the letter to the Hebrews to show you that it was a very elaborately structured sermon. And Hebrews was very well written. It's some of the best Greek in the New Testament. Revelation is interestingly structured, and I'll show you why I say that, but actually it's not very well written. The Greek is almost illiterate, and scholars have wondered about this. Is it just because the writer of this didn't have a very good education? Or some people have even suggested maybe he's intentionally writing in kind of a weird way as sort of almost a form of protest himself against people in power. There's different theories about this, but it's not very good Greek, and it's not very well written, but it does have a fairly intricate and interesting structure. And I call this a structure of cycles, the spiral. I've titled your outline, a spiral outline of Revelation. Because the story, a lot of people have read Revelation. Well, let me also back up and explain what's different this week from what we did last week. Last week, if you recall, I spent a lot of time talking about Hebrews and medieval interpretation because I was trying to illustrate how the historical critical interpretation of these texts that I'm teaching you in the semester is not the only way to do it. There are other kinds of allegorical, theological, literary ways to read these texts, and those are perfectly fine. Now, though, I'm completely reverting back to the historical critical way of reading this text. Partly because the way that so many people in popular culture read Revelation, especially very conservative Christians, is to read it about our time. It's been read over and over again to be about English wars, or World War I, or World War II, or most recently in the late great planet Earth and these kinds of things. It's about the Soviet Union versus the United States of America. And everything that talks about is referring to what's going to happen in our lifetimes. So the weird animals, the locust-type things that have the heads of men and fly through the air, there are all kinds of modern Christians who say, oh, those are helicopters. The author didn't know what a helicopter looked like in the ancient world, so he just described kind of what he saw. But we know now those are helicopters. So he's actually describing a big war that's going to break out around Israel and in Israel when the whole world's going to come to this big cataclysmic nuclear war. And it's all talked about right here in Revelation. Well, obviously, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to show you is how historians read this text precisely by putting it back in its ancient context. But one of the things is, if you notice, the book of Revelation doesn't give one strict timeline. In fact, it seems to have cycles of setting up some kind of weird crisis, having all these terrible things happen, and then have something that looks like a quasi-resolution, and then starting the cycle again. And it ends up being a big cataclysmic crash at the end of the book. So this is why I call this a spiral of cycles that are going on in the book of Revelation. So first, though, look at just chapters 6 through 8. And I'm going to walk you through this very rapidly because you can see something of the structure of this book right here. Now, this is after you've had all the kinds of the letters in the beginning of Revelation. Then you've had the throne room theme of God, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and all the songs that everybody's saying. But let's just walk through this first structure here. Then I saw the Lamb open one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures call out, as with a voice of thunder, "Come!" I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider had a bow. A crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. So this is conquering and warfare is this first horse. When he opened the second seal, now you know what he's going with seals? You picture this now. We've talked about how books were composed in the ancient world, and we've talked about scrolls. Things were in scrolls, not in books like this, right, with all the different pages all sewn together. So what he's imagining, he's seeing is there's this huge scroll in the sky, you know, and that this angel is holding and doing different things with. Well, when you want to finish a letter or a book, you roll up the scroll, and then you put a wax seal at the end of the roll, and that seals the book. So anybody who wants to read that letter or that book the first time has to break that wax seal. So that's the seals he's talking about, are the wax seals on a scroll. And so he imagines that you've got this scroll that has one seal, and you can break that seal, and you can unroll the scroll a little bit, but then you get another seal. So you undo that seal, and you can unroll a little bit more. So he's gradually unrolling this scroll that's going to have all these things pop out of it. So this is a big, huge scroll that has horses and riders jumping out of it and flying through the air. He opened the second seal. I heard the second living creature call out, "Come!" And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth so that the people would slaughter one another, and he was given a great sword. So if the first seal releases this horse that looks like empire, the conquering of the conqueror, the second is just general warfare. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature call out, "Come!" I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider had a pair of scales in his hand, and I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's pay, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's pay, but do not damage the olive oil and the wine." So the third seal is what? Famine. Famine and poverty. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature call out, "Come!" And I looked, and there was a pale green horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed with him. They were given authority over the fourth of the earth to kill with the sword, famine, and pestilence, and by the wild animals of the earth. So death is the fourth seal. When I opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar, notice we're not talking about horsemen anymore. You had 4 horsemen representing 4 different things. The fifth seal has something like a digression. The fifth seal is not another horse like you expect. In other words, you're given to expect that you're going to see another horse that's going to be some other catastrophe. But you don't get that, you have a digression. Under the altar, the souls of those who had been slaughtered for the word of God and for the testimony they had given, they cried out with a loud voice, "Sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long will it be before you judge and avenge our blood on the inhabitants of the earth?" They were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number would be complete, both of their fellow slaves, it says actually in the Greek, not servants, and of their brothers. And it doesn't say sisters. There's almost no women in this text at all. It's all men. Virgin men who have never been polluted by touching women. It's not exactly a pro-woman book. You might not get that idea if you have an English translation that keeps putting sisters in here, but there are no sisters in this book. There's the whore of Babylon, there's the mother bride, and then there are men. Your slaves, your fellow brothers, who are soon to be killed as they themselves have been killed. So what's the fifth seal? Well, it gives him a vision of the altar of God in the temple of God in heaven. There's this big altar, and under the altar are the souls of all the followers of Jesus who have been martyred up to this time, and the souls of those people who will be martyred. And they're not punished, right? They're saying, "How long, how long?" And he says, "Oh, keep your pants on. Here's a white robe. Just, sit there and be nice under the altar. We're going to take care of it all very, very soon." So the fifth seal is actually a digression that tells you, the audience, that if you suffer in this present time, it will be taken care of by God. So you have these 4 building up of terrible things, and the fifth is a digression that gives you comfort, but now we're going to get back. He opened the 6th seal. I looked, and there became a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood. The stars of the sky fell to the earth as fig tree drops its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll rolling itself up. Remember I talked about how the sky in ancient cosmology isn't just air. It's actually a firm thing. It's like a big piece of leather or something like that that sits up there, and there's water on the other side of it. In most ancient cosmologies, or something on the other side of it. So when he talks about seeing the sky rolled up like a scroll, he means that quite literally. The sky goes and rolls up. You can see heaven above it. So the sky vanishes like a scroll. Every mountain and island was moved from its place. Then the kings of the earth and the magnates and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone slave and free hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand?" So the 6th seal is all hell breaks loose. The cosmos is coming down on top of itself. He's created an increasing level of anxiety and catastrophe with these seals. But with that 5th seal is kind of a digression. After this, I saw 4 angels. Now you think, oh man, if the 6th seal is like that, one more seal is coming up. What's the 7th seal going to be? So you just, I'm eager to hear. Remember this, all this was read out loud in the ancient world, so you're hearing all this. I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, hurrying back the 4 winds of the earth. Now you get a bunch of other stuff. I saw another angel ascend, heard the number of those who were sealed. Oh, now you have all the followers of Jesus are numbered into different tribes of 12,000 apiece, and each of those tribes is sealed themselves. Isn't that interesting? You have another use of the term seal, but now this is a seal that's put on the faces of all the people who are the true followers, who are the true Israel. 12 tribes, like the lost 10 tribes and the other 2 tribes of Israel. So there's the reconstituting of Israel now, and they're sealed. And the seal is a good thing. It means you won't be harmed if you have this on you. Okay? That goes on all of chapter 7. Now, you're thinking, where's the 7th seal? You know, we had 6. I know there's another one coming. Where is it? And you have to wait all the way through chapter 7 wanting the 7th seal, but you're not getting it yet. In other words, he's just stringing you along. But he's stringing you along in a way that's kind of good because he's reassuring you. You know the 7th seal's coming, and you're pretty sure it's going to be really, 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 really bad, because the 6th seal was. But before you get to the 7th seal, you have this sealing of you, if you're a faithful follower of Jesus, with the reassurance of a seal. So you have and then you have some songs. We're going to talk about some songs, but everybody comes in, it's like a Broadway play, right? You have something happen, and then the chorus all runs on stage, and they do a little song. Blessed be the Lamb and the power and the power and the power, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. And then they run off, and you have more action. So that's the way the story is structured that way, also for interesting reasons. So we get to the end of chapter 7. We're finally at chapter, and we get to chapter 8. Of course, they're not numbered in the ancient world, but when the Lamb opened the 7th seal, you ready for this? There was silence in heaven for a half an hour. That's the 7th seal. What's going on? The text builds up tension, and you hear this read out loud, and it keeps building up this tension, but then the 7th seal is such a anticlimax. Silence in heaven for a half an hour? But then it doesn't explain anything about that. It just starts over. Then you have another cycle a little bit later. Another angel with a golden censer came and stood by the altar. In other words, what you've got is something like this. You have these 4 seals, which are terrible, 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 awful things. And then you have the 5th, which is a digression, and actually, it's actually a good thing. It's the telling of the souls who have been martyred, don't worry, you'll be saved. Here's a white robe, relax. And then you have the 6th seal, which is another worse thing than all these. It's really, really bad and goes on longer. And then you have this long digression, again, that's like the 5th seal. It's a sealing of the followers of Jesus with salvation. And then after that digression, then you have this 7th seal, which is really kind of anticlimactic. But it's not bad. Silence in heaven for a half an hour. Look at your spiral outline now, because this kind of structure of having a cycle of catastrophes that are interrupted every once in a while by some kind of digression that then ends with something good, that's the way the whole book is structured in 3 different cycles. So, for example, I said in the 4th chapter of Revelation, you have the big heavenly throne room scene. Revelation 5, you have the introduction of the scroll with 7 seals and the Lamb. And then you have the first cycle of 7, and that's what I just walked you through just now. But then right after 8:1, the silence in heaven, it starts again with a second cycle, and you have in 8:2, introduction of 7 angels with 7 trumpets. And then again, you have the first, second, third, and fourth trumpet, which announce these kind of catastrophes. And then you have an interlude where this eagle comes through and announces woes on everybody. And then you have the 5th trumpet in chapter 9, 1 through 12, and the 6th trumpet in chapter 9, verse 13. And then you have chapter 10, which is another interlude, which says, that's about the scroll of prophecy. Chapter 11, you have the talk about the temple, and he has to measure the temple. And then in chapter 11, 14, you have the end of the second woe, announcement of the third woe. And finally, in 11, 15, you have the 7th trumpet. And what does the 7th trumpet introduce? Praise in heaven. Sort of like that half hour of silence. And then you have a long interlude, which is chapter 12, 13, and 14, which is about battles between the woman, who's the mother of the church, or the mother of the Savior, and the dragon. Chapter 13 is about the dragon and the beast. Chapter 14 is about the lamb, the horned lamb, which represents Jesus, who's horned lamb who is wounded. And then you have, starting in chapter 15, verse 1, you have a third cycle of 7 angels and 7 plagues or bowls. And then you have the great conclusion, which is the very end, the destruction of Rome in chapters 17 through 19, the final battle, which is chapter 19, 11 through 21, the imprisonment and eventual destruction of enemies, which is chapter 20, and the establishment of the New Jerusalem in chapters 21 and 22.